No. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Village Council meeting, June 12th, 2023. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to orient you to a number of things, the seating arrangements and the agenda for this meeting, and for perhaps one or more in the future. Several residents commented to me at last month's meeting that newly elected council members were seated at one end and incumbents on the other end of the table, and wondered if that was intentional. Well, it wasn't. It was just kind of random. But I asked current council members if they would mind if seating were made more random for each meeting around the mayor and me, so as not to reinforce what was that observation. None objected to that, and perhaps you noticed the change tonight. Secondly, following a conversation with the mayor and with other members of the council, I've asked council members to follow a practice of the previous council, that is, to raise a hand to be recognized if they wish to speak. And since the straight line in which we sit might make it difficult to see down tables in both directions, I ask my colleagues on the council to help me see raised hands. Please sign in over at the table if you wish to present a comment to council this evening, if you haven't already done that. I will call on people in the order in which they've signed in, and that will make it easy for all of us to know when we'll speak, and so that you know that we haven't forgotten you. While not on the agenda, I will also recognize council members who wish to comment after the public comment period. These comments aren't meant to be the start of a conversation between one or more council members and one or another person in the audience. But I will recognize Mr. Measy first. He's asked me already for a moment to recognize former Councilman Perney, and I'll call him in first before moving to other council members. With the council's involvement in 5500 Wisconsin finished at this point, it would be wise to identify expert counsel for any forthcoming land use issues as they arise for the village, or as counsel is sought for an issue. An attorney with land use experience and expertise had been engaged for the purpose of assisting the prior council and the village staff with work associated with 5500 Wisconsin Avenue development. That engagement is now finished. So I've asked Julian to bring back a recommendation to the council for a future meeting. My understanding, having done a little bit of research, is that there are many attorneys with expertise in transactional representation, like the purchase and sale of property. However, the pool of experts in which we might find someone helpful to us is considerably smaller. Next, a little foreshadowing about a potential future agenda item. Much as we will consider a meeting tonight in July on Page Park, be it a special meeting or a work session, I'd like council to consider another one in the fall. Envision that meeting as the start of a process to hear from you, residents of Friendship Heights, about what your priorities are with respect to development within the village and in neighboring areas. If we have a clear sense of what we'd like our neighborhoods to look like and offer by way of services, we'll be better able to present those priorities and visions to those involved in development, whether they are in the private or public governmental sectors or from philanthropy. This process might inform and run parallel to, or perhaps in conjunction with, the urban design study we'll learn more about tonight. I also expect that as we interact with our jurisdictional or association neighborhoods, mostly people in single-family homes, we'll discover that while we won't all agree on every issue, we will find areas of significant agreement nonetheless. Ours is their neighborhood too. We will be more influential working together than apart. Exactly what form that meeting will take, if any, and its timing would be from an item for this council to consider at a future meeting. But many of you have asked in the past to know more about what might be coming in the village, and so this is by way of a means of a potential heads up. No action has been taken. Now, regarding tonight's agenda, for those who keep careful track, we have no business to conduct under committee reports, so we'll be skipping over that item. You can check that item off your scorecard as complete right now. No committees have met since Council's May meeting. Committee membership, as you might note, will be voted on tonight, which could lead to reports in July. Regarding the agenda, 2 items. I've asked Julian to give us a brief report at each council meeting. On the council, many of us speak with him regularly to be updated on village affairs. I hope his report, as a part of our regular meetings, will be an additional way for him to share significant activities and developments with you too, making the work of council more transparent. I'm also going to move Atara Margulies, her presentation on the urban design study, up on the agenda. In fact, after my comments, I will introduce her. And after that, we'll move on to other items on the agenda. While what she has to tell us may be of interest to all of us, all of what we discuss later in the meeting tonight is unlikely to be of interest to her. And then one last administrative note before I call on Atara. I and several of my colleagues on council wish to schedule what we're calling by shorthand regular office hours. During these times, we'd be available to speak with you for a scheduled period on 1 or more days a month. I'm going to be available on June 22nd from 2 to 4 p.m. At 2 o'clock promptly, and then have 20 minutes during that 2-hour period for each person who wishes to schedule some time with me. So email me at my village address if you'd like to schedule some time. I'll then let you know where we will meet. And Julian has some interesting and useful update to provide, I think, in his comments about a system now being installed at the village that will be helpful to all of us as council members who wish to have office hours with you in the future. With that, Atara, I'm going to turn to you, if you would. Thanks very much for being here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hosting us once again. My name is Atara Margulies. I'm a planner at Montgomery Planning, and I'm here tonight with Larissa Clevin, who's a master plan supervisor at the department as well. We are happy to be back here. We were here in April, and then at that time we introduced a proposed planning study that was focused on existing development potential of a few sites in Friendship Heights, and we talked about which sites we were proposing. However, after we presented here and then at a few other community groups after that, we learned that the discussion that we had and the comments that we heard from the community were interested not as much in these particular sites, but in larger urban issues, and people asked us questions about other planning efforts, and we decided to back up and zoom out, and we're pivoting this study to not be about existing sites and development potential, but rather to be a more holistic look at the urban design framework, if you will, of Friendship Heights, understanding what Friendship Heights is today, how people experience it, what kind of an urban area is it, how does it serve the region and the county. I'm going to talk more in a minute about what this study will be about, but for those people who weren't here last time, I'll just explain who Montgomery Planning is and what we do. We are Montgomery County's planning agency, although we are part of a bi-county entity called the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. The commission includes the park and planning departments for Montgomery and Prince George's counties. In Montgomery County, our department's work can broadly be summarized into 3 categories. We develop master plans, and those can be countywide, or they can be just about one, focused on one area of the county. We review development applications. I think that's the role for which we are most widely known. But we also conduct studies on various issues, typically to help public officials plan for Montgomery County's future. And while we do have some groups in the department that work throughout the county, shown here you can see this map that divides the county into different planning areas. And just for context, Larissa and I are from the purple area at the bottom, which is called Down County internally. And that just focuses on the areas of the county that border DC, essentially inside the Beltway. So we are planners that focus exclusively on the area between DC and the Beltway, which of course includes Friendship Heights. While our master plan work is often more well known than our planning study work, and certainly our development application work is known by everyone, we actually do complete studies on a wide range of topics every year. So here's a list, just as an example, of some recently completed studies from the last few years, and they include a wide range of topics, countywide studies on housing and retail markets, particular studies focused on one area of the county, like agritourism and Wheaton. And so this study that we're going to commence now is going to just be one in a long list of planning studies. Studies can be technical or they can be wide-ranging. Studies do not recommend changes to zoning, and they do not recommend new policies to be implemented by the council. And this is an important distinction, and we'll talk more about it as I continue. But that is something that's important to understand. What we're doing now is not a plan, it's a study. We do studies for lots of reasons, usually to inform future planning in some way or another, or to give us a wider understanding of something that we haven't gotten to study or look at in the context of any other effort that we've done so far. If studies are ever presented to the county council, it is always informational only. There's no sort of recommended changes that take place at the end of a study. So let's talk about this study. This is the Friendship Heights Urban Design Study, pivoting back to what I think was the original name that was thrown out there before we even thought about what we were doing. The goal of this study is to analyze how people experience Friendship Heights today as an urban area. As I said, we are zooming way out from what we thought we were going to study when we realized that there was a lot that was kind of diving in too deep too fast. We're going to be looking at the existing open spaces and the pedestrian and transit networks, understanding the activity centers, and getting a sense of what public life is like in Friendship Heights today. There will be a community engagement effort that will kick off in the fall. This will include regular coordination with municipalities like this one, residents, and even other stakeholders, and it'll be both in person and online. And of course, we're going to coordinate with all the different community groups to make sure everyone has adequate opportunity to participate. And finally, this study, hopefully the findings will highlight the urban design strengths and challenges of this really unique cross-jurisdictional community. So, of course, there's a big question that everyone has been asking us for a while, which is, what about the future sector plan? Aren't we overdue for one? And that's, of course, a question that we've been talking about as well. It has been 25 years, as many people here know, since any real planning work has been done in Friendship Heights, which is a long time for any area of the county. During, like I said, our initial presentations here and elsewhere, we heard that there is interest, perhaps, in a new sector plan in the future. Friendship Heights certainly deserves some attention, and this study will give us an opportunity to understand not just the existing framework, but what your experiences of that area and what other stakeholders' experiences of this area. We also hope to hear what everyone thinks about what they would like to see in the future. What's the future vision of Friendship Heights? And that covers lots of topics that I'm sure we'll enjoy talking to everyone about, just to hear what people think about when they think about Friendship Heights today and tomorrow. The findings from this study will certainly inform any planning effort in the future. As with all master plans, any future sector plan for this area would do the usual comprehensive look: zoning, land use, transportation, open space, etc. And that's not what the study is, but that is what a future sector plan would, of course, do. We are now beginning to think about when that future sector plan could happen. We're working on determining that now. I don't have an answer today, but when we have that answer, it will be publicly shared. But in the meantime, we see this as a good way to start learning about Friendship Heights, since we have not been in the loop, so to speak, on Friendship Heights for a while, and we want to have the right opportunity and sort of not is, an outside of a sector planning process, a more flexible and, time and ability to engage with the community, understand what is Friendship Heights today. The last time, if you read the sector plan, some things sound just like today, but a lot of things sound different. It's 25 years have gone by. Obviously, the world has changed. And so this is a good opportunity for us to just get in here with the community, walk around, understand what it is, what's Friendship Heights about today. And that's really the purpose of the study. And of course, it would inform this future sector plan whenever that takes place. So this study is going to just focus on primarily the area of Friendship Heights that is under the current sector plan. And this is the 1998 boundary. But because it's a study and it's not like making policy, we'll look at some context. We're going to look to understand how Friendship Heights, what's Friendship Heights' role as an urban area in the DMV. But it will focus more so on sort of what we all think of as Friendship Heights, which is not just the village, but also kind of more of the commercial core as we move towards the district. In terms of schedule, we haven't briefed the planning board on this pivoted scope yet. We're returning to community groups we spoke to before to make sure we can explain to everyone why we pivoted, and speaking to some additional groups that we didn't speak to the first time. And then we'll go to the planning board. I think right now, July 13th is the date at the moment. We're not going to do anything else until the fall. All the engagement will happen starting in the fall. I don't know if it's going to be September or October. We'll figure that out, but we're going to figure that out over the summer and give everyone a lot of notice and figure out what kinds of events we want to hold. We haven't figured any of that out yet, so I'm open to suggestions. But we then will probably wrap up our analysis and our engagement certainly by the end of this calendar year and start to summarize and bring it together and speak to the planning board probably around that time. And then when we're totally done with the study and we have a final product, as with everything we put together, there will be a report on our website that people can download and get hard copies from our department, et cetera. And we expect that to be completed by the beginning of the next calendar year. So as all the contact information I shared last time, still valid, my email, my phone number, a slightly different website, but you can just email me if you can't find what you need. And there is an e-letter, and we will be sending out, I can say this before we go to the planning board, with the scope, we will send out an e-letter that will say when we're going to the board and give everyone information about how to follow along. But we'll essentially be presenting this sort of presentation to the board with a lot more background on Friendship Heights. For those who've been following, we have an entirely new planning board now, so we're going to have to bring them along a bit into in terms of what Friendship Heights is and the planning history and all that, and then sort of explain what we're doing, similar to how we are explaining tonight. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Well, Tara, thanks very much for coming back, sharing the revised plans that are there, and for changing them to include public engagement and the engagement of both government and private citizens in this area. I think it's a big improvement personally. Let me see whether members of the council have questions. Anybody want to ask? Martha?
It's sort of a question and a comment. I looked at the what you have on the website, and I have to say I find it hard to understand and sort of vague. Why is this a study and not a master plan? Because the Montgomery County Council said so. How do I get involved? There will be multiple opportunities. What's the difference between a study and a master sector plan? Oh, study is a tool. I don't understand kind of what these words mean. But the thing I'd really like to know now is, can you give sort of with particularity how you ask for and receive input on the types of, when you're doing this task that you're doing? More than just, oh, we ask the community and we touch base with community groups. Like, in more detail, what do you do?
Sure. So while we haven't designed the engagement for this study yet, what I can say is the sort of things we normally do, although I don't know exactly what events we'll do, is we almost always do sort of an open house type event, either online or in person, where planning staff will be in a given location that's convenient for the community, and we work that out with the various communities that we plan, and it will be this would be relatively early on in the work. And like I said, with something like this, we really want to understand Friendship Heights today. So that's asking folks a lot of open-ended questions. We'll probably have a list of questions that we are walk around and ask people, and we'll also could have tables for discussion. Sometimes we put up images. In this case, we might put up images of different parts of Friendship Heights and say, tell us what you like about this, what you don't like about this, or, leave some sticky notes on a map, for example, to let us know what's good, what's bad. That's the sort of stuff we do when we start a study like this, when we start this kind of engagement effort. We usually also have a survey online asking the similar kinds of questions, so folks who can't come in person or can't come to a live event online can, their survey will be up for like a month or two, and we'll make sure to distribute it through the e-letter, but also send to all of our community partners so they can distribute. And that also allows us to ask, 5 to 10 questions where we can hear people's responses about, it's all going to be framed around what's great about Friendship Heights, what do you wish was different? That's like sort of the theme of the kind of engagement questions we ask. We might have more specific questions about parks, or specific questions about streets, or specific questions about the connection to DC or the transit connections. But the gist is what's working for you now in Friendship Heights. If you live here, do you love it? If so, why? Let's understand sort of the character of the neighborhood. Let's understand what's great about it, understand what people wish it had that it didn't have. Those are the kinds of things that really help us understand where our community is coming from at the beginning of something like this. Does that help answer your question?
Somewhat. Could you provide a sample of a study like this you've done for another neighborhood so we get an idea of what is the kind of output that might be expected?
Sure. So the last study that was done for like a specific area was the Wheaton downtown study. However, that's not going to be exactly analogous. The challenges in Wheaton are extremely different than any challenge in Friendship Heights. So it's hard to say one or the other. One of the things that's great about studies is we can, unlike with a master and sector plan, where we have a list of things that we must we must look at, and then sometimes we get to add other things in, but there is sort of a minimum level of consistency we have to adhere to, and we don't have as much flexibility to sometimes bring in other things. With a study, we can say, oh, this is something we really want to understand. From an urban design perspective, what we're trying to understand mostly is how does Friendship Heights come together as an urban area? How do the streets work? How do the open spaces work? How is the pedestrian network? What kind of transit do we have here? Are people using it? Is it letting them get where they want to go? When people come to Friendship Heights, where do they hang out? Or where do they hang out if they live here? Those are the kinds of, it's mostly public realm focused, if that makes sense. The Wheaton Downtown study was not completed by our segment of the planning department, but it was probably the last study that our department did that was focused on an urban-ish area. So there are probably going to be analogous things between that study and this study, but I think their scope was a little bit different. Again, it was focused on, they had a different focus because they were dealing with a different type of urban area. I think we have very different challenges in those two places, but.
Michael?
Tara, thank you for coming. I don't mean to sound cynical, so please excuse. And I appreciate your commitment to public input and all of those things. Would it be an overstatement to say that whatever comes out of all this is going to be much greater density here in the Friendship Heights area, given the fact that we are near a major metro stop? We have some open land here where the bias of the planning process has always been to build more and more things as close as possible to metro and transportation areas of this sort to prevent sprawl going out into other areas, so that while we can shape some of what's going on, that the bottom line is that this area 5, 6, 7 years from now will have a great deal more density than it currently has.
So the study isn't going to recommend anything. It's going to document the existing conditions with regard to all those topics and subjects I talked about and collect everyone's thoughts about what's the experience in Friendship Heights today. That's as far as the study goes, because studies don't recommend what to do in the future. As far as the sector plan, whenever that happens, and however that takes form, I have no idea what that will take. I would say that in the sense that all plans that we do as a department are somewhat in line with the principles of Thrive. That is a department that is, I think that's not a secret, right? I mean, I think that's a known thing about how the planning department functions. But as to generally what happens in an urban area, regardless of what's planned or not planned, is a function of the market. But that's a sector plan conversation, which is, in the future. The study isn't really going to deal with any of that or even make any kind of recommendations like we think X should happen here. It's going to talk about what's here now, and we're really not going to focus on buildings. We're really focused on public realm and people's experience, which I think has a lot to do with what you experience when you walk down the street or when you visit a place or when you're hanging out in a public space. That's what the urban design study is going to focus on. And we're going to take and, listen to everybody. But certainly whatever happens here, the engagement that happens during this process, it will inform whatever sector plan that comes next in that way. But this isn't going to make any recommendations of that sort, if that helps clarify.
Roy?
This sort of piggybacks on Michael's question, but do you incorporate a market study into what you're doing?
So a market study would be part of a sector plan. And we've talked about this back and forth, but frankly, it makes more sense to hold off on a market study until the timing of the sector plan is kind of known and we know when that happens, because it's only as useful as the market in which it's in, right? So that is something we toyed with, but we really want to focus on sort of existing conditions from an urban design perspective. But I am sure whenever we get to that sector plan, for this area, a market study is often part of what we do, and it would for sure be part of Friendship Heights. Okay,
and I know you said you're not making recommendations, but do you, in your conclusions, do you forecast trends or make predictions?
That's a good question. It's really dependent by study. I think what we will try and do here is identify what we would call, people call it different things. We would try to identify strengths and challenges, I think, as a way of sort of analyzing the existing environment without saying, but, this or this should happen, because that's really a sector plan department. And if we're going to make recommendations, we have to go through that rigorous sector plan process that we don't make recommendations without going through that process.
Thank you.
Cheryl, anything? Okay. Paula, anything? Ellen? Okay. Atara, thank you very much. See whether there are people who are attending here tonight who have questions. Any? Sure. Dan?
One of the things that's unusual about Friendship Heights is that we're adjacent to DC, and that has a big impact on us and we on them. Are you going to look at the DC, understanding that you can't control, but you're not trying to control in this study, you're just trying to understand. Are you going to look at DC as well?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because I should have mentioned that, so I appreciate that question. Yes, since this is a study and we're not making any, we can't do anything, DC is not our jurisdiction, but this is allowing us to look at the entire context. We will certainly be looking at DC. We are in regular contact with DC Office of Planning as a group, because we border so much of their border, and we're always all doing planning efforts, sometimes in the same neighborhoods. And so we're up to date on their work on Wisconsin Avenue on that side. And we're certainly going to take into account what's going on there now as part of the overall context for Friendship Heights in the study. Yes, thanks for reminding me of that fact.
Roger?
I had detailed comments on this topic, council, but I did have a question. Sorry. I have more detailed comments on this topic, which are for the council when we get to the public comments. But my question is, at this stage, do you intend on contracting out any of the work of this study, or is it going to be 100% done by county staff?
Thank you for asking that. So the majority of the work of the study is going to be done by staff, i.e. me and a few other of my colleagues. We are not quite finalized yet, but we are working on bringing in a consultant actually to help us with the engagement, someone who has a really lot of experience doing exciting things that engage stakeholders, and that's something that we're increasingly doing, is drawing on folks who have an even greater depth of experience than we do to come up with more exciting ideas that we have not thought of before in terms of engaging stakeholders, but that's the only consultant that'll be involved in the study. Sorry, I can't share the name yet, but when we get started, everyone will know, because then the contract will be signed.
Thank you again for the presentation. At your last presentation, you had specific, I think, 4 parcels or 5 parcels. Have these now receded, or are you still focused on those? Because there were a few of those that seemed not to be in agreement with what you said tonight. What you said tonight was there were not going to be any discussion of sector plan, and some of those parcels had presumably already been, at least under the present sector plan, completed.
Correct. We're not looking at specific sites. We've sort of abandoned that path, pivoted completely, much higher level, understanding the holistic nature of Friendship Heights, getting a understanding of how it relates or doesn't relate to the context, to DC, to the rest of the county, how it functions, understanding what makes up Friendship Heights. So yes, we have pivoted entirely. No more focus on those sites than on any other site in Friendship Heights in this new direction.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Patricia Canesa. I just came 2 weeks ago to Friendship Heights, so I'm sorry I am a new guy here. I want to clarify that the study is not a research. So for the people that is very, very concerned about the fact that we are not going to have the next step, yes, when you have a research, you have the next step, and you have the methodology to do that. The study is just to provide a series of recommendations. My question would be that part of the study many times is that it's forces of change. Let's say you have a place that is being flooded in Friendship Heights, and something needs to be done regarding that, and the community is very concerned about that. The question is how far is going to go the study in order to carry those elements, bring it into the public, obviously bring it into the hard conversation, the funding. Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, colleagues on the council, anything? Tara, then.
What was the question? Can you restate what the question was? I feel like.
If there is forces of change, the question is
Okay.
and obviously those forces of change lead into solutions.
Okay. So thank you. So as I said, we're looking at this study as one piece, but we're going to take into account all of the engagement and all the answers to the questions. We're going to try and report them with the study, but there isn't going to be any solutions proposed until we get to the sector plan, because studies don't recommend solutions in the way we work. And so, but we will be sort of carrying forward all of those questionnaires and all what we heard, all the engagement, and that will feed in. Whenever that sector plan happens, we'll revisit all of that, and then there'll be more engagement. All sector plans come with even more engagement, so it will just be a continuum, if that makes sense. Thank you. I didn't understand what the question was, but thank you for explaining. Yes. So I'll answer the second part first, because that's easier to answer. Sector plan for an area like this, I mean, a lot of it depends. There's a lot of things that it depends on. So I won't. It depends on often how the engagement goes, and then it often depends on the work sessions we do with the planning board, and then ultimately with the council. But the start to real finish, approved and adopted, is usually around 2.5 years. Could be a little shorter or longer. That means from the time we show up at the planning board and say, here's the scope, and they say, okay, go ahead, from those early engagement that happens around that, all the way to the time when we're done with all the approvals at the municipality. So that's 2.5, sometimes it's 2 years if it's fast, sometimes it's 3 years. I mean, it really, but let's say 2.5 on an average. And in terms of when, usually there's a long lead time. There's months of lead time. So we don't say, oh, we're doing it, and we come and say, we're done. We're starting right now. There's usually months of lead time from the time an announcement is made to the actual start or approval of a scope. I mean, there's pre-engagement and things like that.
And you would expect, and we could expect as a council for Friendship Heights, that we would get lots of advance notice and that this was going on the agenda for consideration.
Absolutely.
Nothing would be a surprise.
What we're working on is generally never a surprise if you know where to look on the council's webpage for the work plan. It's always approved. Every 6 months, we have to give them an update, and they publish that. So there's always a 6-month lead time, I would say, on anything that we're doing. So that's a minimum, I guess.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Sure.
You
Thank
and
for having
Larissa are welcome to stay for the entire meeting or leave right now if you like. We won't hold that against you because we know we'll see you again and we know where you work and live.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely be back. And so I'm sure we won't see you guys until after the summer. So thank you for having us. Have a great summer.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to comments to the council. So has everybody who wants to speak tonight signed in already? If you haven't, please do. I respectfully ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I've asked staff to manage the timer. You'll hear the alarm go off at the 3-minute mark. If you think you have comments that will run longer than 3 minutes, don't despair. Simply summarize your major points within the 3-minute period. We're streaming the council meeting tonight. If you have joined us online, you know that. And we know that you can hear and see us if the system is working well, but we can't hear or see you. Whether you're here in person or not, if you wish, please send your comments to info@friendshipheights.gov. We welcome written comments of any length addressed to the council. They can be handwritten or in PDF format. These comments, if you make them and submit them, should be headed with your name, your address, the date of the relevant council meeting, and the topic that you wish to address as well. Yeah, I'll read it again. info@friendshipheightsmd, thank you, Martha, .gov. And please submit your written material by Thursday, 5 p.m. This week. Please note also that your comments, if in person, will be part of the video record of this meeting tonight. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online. And if you make public comments, you confirm your permission to be recorded. I mentioned at the last meeting that all written material would be posted online. There's a difference of opinion about whether this system should be established. And I'll ask our new communications committee, once it's formed, to examine the pros and cons of posting material and bring a recommendation back to council for a future meeting. In the meantime, all material submitted will reach all members of the council and be available for inspection. So with that, let me go down in the list. There are 15 people who wish to speak tonight, and I'll start with Gay Passes. Yes, thank you. Would you give us your name and your address as well? Thank you.
Need one. So my name is Gay, G-A-Y-E, Passes, like passes to the movies, and I reside at 4620 North Park. I'd like to say first, or preface my remarks by the fact that I wrote this letter to all of you. after you were elected. And I heard from one person. I got a response from one of you. I won't mention names, but it was a very nice reply acknowledging my letter. So thinking that perhaps all of you didn't read it, I'd like to read it tonight. Oh, you're having, okay. I reside at 4620 North Park Avenue, where I have lived for 12 years. Prior to that, I resided at the Elizabeth for 8 years. Thus, Friendship Heights has been my home for 20 years. Before that, I became a Bethesda resident in 1969. But for a 2-year, what I call a stint in Gaithersburg, this area has been my home for 51 years. Needless to say, it means much to me from a personal history stance as regards the present and looking ahead to the future. I voted in this most recent Friendship Heights Village election with an eye on the past and 2 eyes on the future. I voted for change, hoping for more community involvement in the choices made by the Village Council, which have affected our past and will continue to affect our future and our pocketbooks. Since I was not able to attend the meeting, remember I wrote this after your election, the other evening, for the swearing in of the newly elected council members, I depended on a dear friend who was there to give me his observations. He mentioned the remarks made at the mic by community members regarding Page Park, and I would very much appreciate your taking my thoughts about this to heart. Although a handful, if that, of attendees made it clear they did not support getting rid of any of the new changes, it is important to remember that those of you who are new to the council were elected by a large margin of voters hoping for change. As one of those, I can honestly say that change means including us and our opinions prior to forging ahead, spending great sums of money to implement only, and I don't mean this as an insult, only your ideas. That doesn't mean you need to come to the residents with every minor expenditure on your docket. $850,000 is not minor. The community should have been polled regarding any changes to the lovely green-benched area known as Page Park, an area where a mother and her children could have an afternoon lawn picnic by throwing a blanket down on the grass. Anyone could take advantage of the serenity of the park to sit on a bench and read on a sunny day. Or perhaps a few picnic benches could have been a far less expensive addition while allowing the greenery which so many of us support. My friend told me someone spoke up suggesting we keep much of what Green Sweep designed and installed, not the concrete. In addition, it was suggested that we walk back and do it right this time by interviewing 3 different landscape architects as opposed to lawn care companies.
Ms. Passes, excuse me. Your time is up. Do you have much more? That's 3 minutes, yes.
Oh, too bad.
And please feel free to provide your comments
That's all right.
to us. Thank you.
You all have copies of it somewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on the list is Clara Lovett.
Good evening, Clara Lovett at the Carlton. Yesterday, I attended the fundraiser for the Friendship Heights Neighbors Network. Councilman Friedson was there, and he answered questions about many topics. Willard Avenue Park came up, and I want to share some good news with you. Some of the questions had to do with what was happening, what was going to be done to improve and expand Willard Avenue Park. For a very long time, more than 20 years, the council of the village of Friendship Heights was thinking of expansion of the park and improvements in terms of tearing down the Reynolds house on Willard Avenue, the light blue house, okay? That house is now again up for consideration by the Historic Preservation Commission. I have no idea what their chances of getting historic preservation status might be. But now we can focus on something else in the park. Less than 2 years ago, the county bought 2 rundown, unoccupied houses at the intersection of River Road and Willard Avenue, fairly large chunk of land next to the playground for little kids. Because those properties are scheduled to be torn down, they have no market value as rentals. That is an excellent opportunity to expand the park. And for the proponents of the dog park, you still have an option to recommend to the Parks Department that the dog park go at that end of the park, close to River Road. If you're not a proponent of the dog park, you might find other uses for that piece of land. The point is, we can liberate ourselves from the perennial controversy about the Blue House. The Reynolds House may or may not be chosen, designated for as a historic property. Never mind, I think we residents of the village and neighboring subdivisions can work on improving the park, expanding it, and also, again, revisiting the question of the dog park.
Thank you, Ms. Lovett. Jean Allen?
Hi, my name is Jean Allen, and I live at North Park. My husband and I moved to this area just shy of 4 years ago, and our condo overlooks Page Park. When we heard that the park was going to be redone, we were quite excited. However, as we watched the revamping of the park, we failed to understand why no one capitalized on extending the natural beauty of the woods. I have written to the former council relative to my concerns. I feel that the natural beauty of the park currently is swallowed up by a sea of cement. My assumption is that the contractor who was responsible for the design and implementation was possibly not given this charge or was not the best fit for a creation of a more natural setting. My question to you is, would it be possible to regroup, to reassess Page Park by gathering consensus from the residents as to what they may visualize for the park and go forward from there? Thank you.
Thank you. Joan Wheeler?
Good evening, Joan Wheeler, 4701 Willard Avenue. I just have a question, and I don't know where I should ask it on the agenda, and it has to do with a practical question about Page Park. Okay, I just wanted to bring up the question about I understand there's one final payment to be made on the park and upon completion. So my question is, when is completion determined? You know, is it a specific date when they put their shovels and put it back in the truck? And then they would issue a check, or do they wait a certain amount of time? And what happens if a large portion of the trees or bushes begin to die off? What is the procedure then?
Thanks, Joan. I'll ask Julian or a member of staff to get back with you and give you some answers to that. Next, Pamela Harris, I think. Pamela?
Either you can't see me or I can't see you, so I apologize for that.
We can't see you.
You can't see me. Well, I don't look so great tonight anyhow. And I hide behind a mask because I'm, you know.
Would you move the microphone closer to you? Thank you.
I'm almost aspirating it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll take my mask off. So I consider myself somewhat of a poet and a pragmatist, and with a deep sense of history. And I'm concerned about the implications of the broader implications of the decisions that have been made and may still be made or changed for Page Park. We are a country of democracy, or at least I like to believe that we still are a country of democracy. I don't believe that this went through, as far as I can tell, a democratic process with respect to everybody that wanting to weigh in. I guess in a community of 5,000 people, there was zero say in changing the identity or the park away from the natural rustic three choices, which were non-starters because we wanted a rustic park. And the county apparently agrees with us. They want more green spaces. I think that obviously there's somebody who's not with us tonight who's really been a proponent for maintaining the rustic style of Page Park. That person speaks strongly and may alienate people sometimes. I happen to really respect her, but I understand that. And I understand where there may have been some natural feedback that was not based solely on her feelings, but perhaps on the way that she presented things. But as I said, I respect her. The other thing that really matters to me beyond democracy is culture, something that I think we are also losing in America. We were all forced to read Thoreau in high school. I think there was a reason for that. I think we need to respect culture. I think we need to respect nature. I think it enriches our lives and makes our lives worth living. I think that we really need to reconsider again how democracy and culture are or are not feeding into the decisions that will or have been made about Page Park. I think we all matter here, and I think our democracy matters even more. So I just wanted you to know that I'm supporting the traditional values of Page Park.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Ms.
for your
Harris.
time.
Thank you. Lynn Connor?
Let's see if I can get this right.
Good so far.
I'm Lynn Connor. My husband and I live at 4620 North Park Avenue. And I would like to make a couple of comments regarding Page Park, which I had not intended to make publicly. I'd sent you all an email, and I got a very nice response back. Thank you very much. But would you please come here and make them also? So that's why I'm here. Regarding Page Park, it's not the design I would have chosen. I would have preferred something else. However, it is the chosen design, and I'd like to make a couple of comments on some small modifications that could be made. The first one is just a simple one, a safety issue. I had a school teacher friend point out to me, the first thing she said when we walked through the park, oh, the children's play area goes straight, the kids run out the back, and they can fall down the hill. Little kids are like snail darters. You can't, and could we please put some, suggestion was that, maybe some mountain laurel or some very natural woodsy plants could go there. If we have an issue with the natural watershed and we can't put plants in there, just extend the wall of the barbecue area across the back so that a small child can't dart over. I saw a child dart the other day and a mother quickly running after him and grabbing him and turning him around. So that was my first point. Secondly, I feel strongly that a few of the areas are overplanted. In particular, it would actually look more woodsy if it wasn't overplanted. In the northwest corner, there are two very nice Japanese cedars surrounded by these things called some kind of laurel, which the village is filled with them. You see them in front of every building. They're leafy green. Some have grown real big, and they keep them trimmed to keep them in proportion. They're crushing, and these trees almost already touch each other, the bushes and the cedar. I would recommend relocating a bunch of the laurel. I think they call it, I've forgotten what kind of laurel, cherry laurel. They could be relocated next to the blank wall on the building on the other side of the park, and that would soften that wall, and it would free up some space. Woods are not just jammed with stuff. You're supposed to be able to see the plants in the woods, not just a mass of green, and to just open it up a little bit. And I obviously have lots of little things, but the final thing I would like to request is that since the park does have a large hardscape to it in the center in gray, that through the winter months, we watch it, you look at it, and see how much of the deciduous plants just you lose the green, see what eventually could be replaced with green on a lot of the areas where there's 1,000 little plants of different kinds, and sort of develop the green side of the park to soften the hardscape of the gray. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Connor. Roger Cacchetti?
Roger Cochetti, 5500 Friendship Boulevard. My comments are on the subject earlier of the planning department, and 4 quick points. First, one of the things that gives Friendship Heights the charm that it has is the checkerboard pattern of high-rise and low-rise structures. The benefit of the low-rise structures is that it gives people on the street an opportunity to see the sky. And for most of the history of human beings, looking at the moon, the stars, the clouds, the sky has been inspirational, much more than television or iPhones or whatever else. So it is important, I'd say vital, to the quality of our life to preserve that checkerboard pattern, which was what was so annoying about the original planning department. We found 10 places where you have low rises and even lawns. How disgusting. We have to get rid of that. Secondly, the passionate drive for increased population density. I think my quick advice to the council is what we should tell the planning department is we in Friendship Heights, you can declare success and move on, please. With a population density of 80,000 people per square mile, we are more than 10 times more densely populated than any other metro station in the whole region, much less Maryland. So you don't have to increase population density here. There are 100 other metro stations where they can even begin to catch up with us. Thirdly, the question that they're now supposed to be looking at is what it is that Friendship Heights needs. Well, I can tell you it doesn't need anything high-rise, and it doesn't need increased population density. But it does need a library, it needs an arboretum, it needs a botanical garden, it needs a pickleball court, it needs a soccer field, it needs a playhouse, it needs a movie theater. There are a million things that Friendship Heights needs, but another high-rise and increased population density is not among them. Lastly, I think it's important to recognize that who's watching you most closely is Berkshire Hathaway. They own a huge section of land, which we call Geico, and they are well known for being, as somebody who's invested in real estate for the last 40 years, they're well known for unlocking hidden value. And the difference between a wall of 40-story high-rise residential structures on Willard Avenue and a potmark of low-rise, townhouses is about $3 billion. Now, for $3 billion, I can donate to a lot of charities and spend a lot of money on PR firms. They're going to be watching what you do more than anybody. Thank you.
Mr. Cacchetti, thanks very much. Mike Dorsey?
Yes, thank you. Mike Dorsey, 4620. I would like to know when we get to the treasurer's report what the return on the financial investments were for this month. So I'd like to get that. Now, on Page Park, we all have our opinions on it. Frankly, I love it. I think it looks beautiful. My wife thinks it looks beautiful. A number of the neighbors in 4620 that I've spoken to like it and enjoy it as well. But I do want to say that I've been coming to these meetings for 10 years, so I've been to about at least 100, 120 meetings. And for anyone to say that they weren't given an opportunity to weigh in on Page Park would be lying to you, because I was at the meetings. It was discussed almost at every meeting. Even before I got on the council, it was being discussed. So do not believe anyone that tells you that they did not have an opportunity to weigh in. And if anybody wants to debate me on that, all you have to do is look at the minutes or listen to the tapes for the last 10 years, and you'll see and hear how much it was discussed. So I would like to say I'd like to see the park move along. I hope you put the committee in place quickly and don't drag your feet. I'd like to see chairs and tables in there. I was just in New York City and in Central Park and Bryant Park, and they have random chairs and tables, and people can gather in groups of 2 or 3 or 6. I hope you don't make it sounds like everything's becoming uniform now. I hope it's not like straight benches put in there. We all have to sit in a line. So my recommendation is let's make it casual where people can gather as they like, and let's get it moving along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Chanel, I can't read your last name. If you'd spell it, I will clear it up on here so that I can read it. And if you'd pronounce it too, that'd be great. Sorry.
Yes, my name is Chanel Gutari.
Gutari.
It's
okay.
Gutari.
Thank you.
And I live in Highlands House West. I'm a renter. I've been there for 7 years, and prior to that, I was up the street at, used to be called the Willard, now is a new name. So I've been in the neighborhood for close to 10 years, and I really love living here. My question has to do with rent increases. And I'm wondering what sort of resources, if any, are available to renters that limit the ability of the buildings to force us out of the neighborhood with very high rent increases. The people that I have spoken to in my building seem to have different relationships with management so that they're sometimes able to negotiate lower rents than others. And so I know a number of people who've left my building because of rent increases, and I'm facing some issues in that regard right now, and I'm wondering if the council offers any sort of support or mechanisms for renters that are in the neighborhood.
Thank you for your comment. I suspect one or more council members may want to talk with you or follow up with you on that issue. Yeah. Pat Donovan?
I'm Pat Donovan from 4620. I think the park looks great. I was concerned when I saw the big hardscape. I was a little worried that it was too big, but I think with all the plantings in, it really looks nice, and I can't wait for the furniture to be on it. And I love the benches spread out among the around the park. So I'm very happy with it. I have two concerns. One is I think pretty easy to fix, and that is it's my understanding that the children's play area, assuming that goes forward, that there will not be any play equipment in there for several months. And if that's the case, could you please arrange to have some really significant mulch or something put down there so it's not a dirt/mud pit for however long it takes? And the other is, and this, I know I sound like a broken record, dogs. I look out on the park, and every day I see dog walkers with 2 or 3 sizable dogs, letting them go wherever they want. A friend of mine who lives a couple stories up, the day after the lawn was laid down, in a 20-minute period, there were 10 dogs on the lawn. I mean, you've spent a lot of money to make this park really nice. And I just urge you to do whatever you can, whether you can actually prohibit dogs, and if not, you have big signs that say this park is for people, not dogs. I know people, not everybody would obey that, but it would also give permission for people who are in the park to tell dog walkers to get their dog out of the plantings because they go in there all the time and trample them. So anyway, but thank you for the park.
Thank you, Ms. Donovan. Cameron Moody?
Cameron Moody. I'm at 4601, the Elizabeth. I wanted to also say that I really like the park. At the Elizabeth, we have a millennials group meeting once a month. So about a dozen millennials, we meet and walk to an area restaurant. And during our last meeting in May, I talked about Page Park, which no one was familiar with, interestingly enough. And we walked over after leaving Maywa, and the excitement and wonder that all the people in the millennial group had about the park was very refreshing for me. And so the questions were, when are they going to get the tables out? When are we going to get the chairs out? How soon can we have our millennial meetings there? So I think that you might have a vocal minority who doesn't like the park. I know someone as myself who's lived here for 12 years. I've never stepped foot in Page Park. I would never step foot in Page Park. And since it's been there, I sit on the walls when I have an opportunity. I plan to do that more when furniture's out, and I suspect that you're going to see more of that when there's furniture out. I also would assume that you see more people there than you have. I know as someone who doesn't have a direct view of the park, I would assume that buildings that do see people there more than they had in the past. I also wanted to speak about the development concerns. I think that as residents, we have to realize that we either have to force ourselves to get better or allow ourselves to get worse, because as we see, there's no such thing as staying the same. I've said this before. Neighborhoods like Cleveland Park have recently done surveys, and something like 60 to 65% of the residents, when they engaged with the planning board, asked for the highest densities on their Connecticut Avenue corridor, because restaurants are telling residents, we're leaving because we can't compete with downtown. This isn't a destination. People don't want to come here. And I think that Cleveland Park at this point in time is more appealing than Friendship Heights. So if they're dealing with those concerns in an area that I think personally has more character than Friendship Heights, and they're willing to move in a direction that asks for more people and a bigger population to support businesses, I think it would be foolhardy for us who actually live in an urban area to say that we want to shut the door behind the people who would want to live here with us. I know that developers are characterized as big bad people, but I have a very sneaking suspicion that most of us live in buildings built by developers. I don't think very many of us got the tools out and built our residences. And so without developers, we wouldn't be here. And if we have more people who want to be here with us and want to help support our commercial corridor, which is on its last legs, I think that we'd be very foolish to turn our back to that. So, in closing, I'd just like to say I think we need to turn from the past and look towards the future and ask what the future should be. I think those are the questions we need to be asking now.
Mr. Moody, thank you very much. Al Muller?
Good evening, council members. For the record, I'd like your thoughts either now or at a future meeting on two important issues for the village regarding safety or health. Nothing about Page Park. First, would you consider adding speed bumps at 2 more village intersections in order to improve pedestrian safety? I've heard increasing concerns from residents concerning pedestrian safety at 2 specific intersections, North Park and Friendship Boulevard, and North Park and Shoemaker Farm Lane across from the Gourmet Market. Residents from both the Carlton and the Elizabeth have informed me of incidents when they were almost struck by cars coming downhill who did not stop for the stop signs or the pedestrian brick pathway. Residents sitting at the bus stop near the village center right out front here have counted while they sat there waiting for the shuttle bus. They've counted numerous cars going through that intersection without stopping. The speed hump placed at the intersection of Hills Plaza and South Park Avenue worked well to slow or stop traffic and was intended to be the first of a few such speed controls, only awaiting winter snow to see how the snow plows would impact the hump. Unfortunately, or fortunately, there was no snow this year, but obviously surrounding communities have reported no major snowplow problems with their speed humps. And in any case, it seems to me that pedestrian safety trumps any unproven snowplow damage to the humps. I would like council members to think about it and perhaps have it on the agenda next time. Secondly, there have been increasing comments in the past about trash and or dog waste along especially North Park Avenue. My suggestion is a simple one. A few more trash receptacles would help on the street. For example, at least 4. Replacement of one near the Gourmet Market. There used to be one right outside. It's been removed. There's a place for it on the village sidewalk. Another trash receptacle at the top of Shoemaker Farm Lane, at the top of the hill. Another near the Willoughby Bench at the top of North Park Avenue. And a 4th next to the dog poop bag across the street. There's a nice bag receptacle, but there's no place to put a full bag, and sometimes they're just left on the street. I'd also suggest that each residential building be encouraged to provide a poop bag stand near their entranceway if they have dogs in their building. This is presently done by both Highland Houses and the Carlton. I know the Elizabeth has not done that. In any case, I would hope that these suggestions are included in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muller. Dan Dozier?
First, I'd like to thank Cameron for his comments on density in the village. I completely agree with him, and I think there are many people who live here because of the urban character of this neighborhood. That's not to say that every building has to be 40 stories or 8 stories, but the value of an urban area well done is important. The big issue is going to be Geico, and that's going to be a huge issue. My main point is I'd like to ask a question about the Community Advisory Commission. I looked at the names of the people who are on the commission currently, and there are no people from 3 buildings in this community, and that is the 2 Highland Houses and the Carlton. And it seems to me one of the functions and one of the reasons for having a Community Advisory Committee is to hear from people living in all of the buildings. So I strongly suggest that you consider there are more than one person from several buildings, and either replace some of those people with people from other buildings or increase the size. But I think there gets a point where the size becomes problematic, but increase the size of the advisory committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dozier. Stephanie Clipper? Just sign in. Okay. All right, thank you very much. That completes those who have signed in. Thank you very much for your comments and for keeping to the 3-minute limit. Again, if there are comments from people who are listening to this streaming, please submit your comments. And if those of you who had an opportunity to speak have written comments you'd like to submit, or if you haven't spoken but would like to submit comments, please do. At this point, I'd like to recognize council members to see whether they have anything that they would like to say. And I'd first like to recognize Mr. Measy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to take a few moments to say a few words about our former colleague, Bruce Perny, who had to leave. I was hoping to say something while he was still here, but the change in the agenda meant that he had to go off. In any event, I wanted to acknowledge his years of service on our council. the great Speaker of the House of Representatives, Sam Rayburn, back in the 50s and early 60s, used to tell new members of the House that they could be either show horses or work horses. A show horse talked about everything and anything, often without any information, and especially when there was a camera or a journalist or a constituent nearby. A workhorse was somebody who dived into a particular public policy area, learned a great deal about it, educated himself and his colleagues on it, and then got stuff done. In his 4 years on our council, Bruce was the epitome of a workhorse. Setting about to improve the look of the village, he worked with Julian on getting our street lamps repainted after many years, planting a ton of new trees, and getting grass on the verges between the street and the sidewalk replanted, and grass that actually survived. When the safety issue came up some months ago, he researched and wrote a comprehensive report on security cameras and how and where they might be most helpful. The report would be a good starting point for our new safety committee. He initiated the idea of the speed bump at South Park and Hills Plaza, annoying to some drivers, I'm sure, but clearly a help for safety at that busy intersection. And of course, to raise a sensitive issue, he was the driving force behind the reimagining of Page Park. Speaking with colleagues, residents, he developed a consensus on how to move forward. He initiated the idea of a competition to produce the best design, and when the design was selected after a broad public discussion, he worked closely with residents and the contractor on realizing the plan and its implementation. No matter what one's views are on the redesign of the park, and I'm among those who think it's good, it's terrific. The long hours that Bruce put into this project, I think, needs to be recognized. I'm sure that my colleagues here join me in recognizing Bruce's 4 years of distinguished service to the community, and I will send these comments to Bruce later on so he may see them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Are there other members of the council who wish to make a statement or say anything? No.
Thank you for your comments, Michael. I certainly agree with everything you've said, and I hope that at the time that we have a formal dedication of Page Park, that Mr. Perney will be there front and center, because he has done the bulk of the work on moving that project forward.
Thank you. Other comments about any topic from members of the council? Hearing none, Melanie, would you give us the mayor's announcements?
Please join us for our annual Independence Day celebration on Tuesday, July 4th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Village Center. We will have more details about the festivities in the July newsletter.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Thanks. Move on to the secretary's report. Martha?
All of you have the minutes from the last meeting before you. And am I too quiet? Okay, you all have the minutes before you, and I'm offering a motion to adopt them. Yes, that's right.
Is there support for the motion to adopt the minutes? Melanie, thank you very much. Is there any discussion about the minutes? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The minutes carry. Thank you very much, Martha. Treasurer's report, Roy?
Okay, let me start out by addressing, there was a question about the CDs and the returns. We have a laddered CD structure that was put in place by the prior board, so I'm not sure what, I think the question was the return for the month, and I don't know that at this point. There have been no decisions that have had to be made on reinvesting any of that money. And when we have a new finance committee, which hopefully is today, that's something we will be taking up. Go ahead. Right. So the structure that has the returns and the yields, as I said, it was put in. I don't know the exact return on, but it's something that was put in place by the prior board. I can get you that answer if you want, and get it for you, but I can't give it to you at this point. Okay.
Thank you, Roy.
And I would ask that if you know, to make sure it gets on the agenda and there is a record, you send an email. You could send it to the council, or you could send it to me in that way. I'm sorry, you can send an email either to my email. Okay. All right. What? Yeah. All right, that's fine. So I've heard the question, and I will have an answer for you. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to say, this is more of an administrative matter, but we are moving towards a new payment system. The one we have now is quite old. It sort of hasn't kept up to the times. We don't have a way to process approvals electronically, which really became a problem during COVID. So we're moving towards a new streamlined system. One of the things we had in place with the prior board, all 7 council members were signers on the checks, because almost every check had to be signed physically by 2 council members. And we're going to be moving away from that, but under the bylaws, only 2 signers are authorized automatically, which are the treasurer and the chairman. So I would like to propose a motion to add 2 more authorized signers, which would be Michael and the mayor. So do we do that now as a motion, or?
The chairman and the mayor, or
No, the
Michael
chairman,
Macy
and the treasurer are automatically signers.
Right.
So I'm sorry, the proposal would be to add Melanie and Michael as authorized signers.
Is there,
Second the motion.
okay. Is there any discussion about the motion, Michael? And then Cheryl?
No, I have a lot of expenses, so I'm very glad to be in.
I'm trying to understand, how many signers are you proposing now?
Well,
to have?
currently, under the last board, we had 7, which
yeah.
isn't a good practice. 2 are automatically approved, so I'm saying for now, and since we need on many checks, we need to, that means the 2 people authorized would have to sign every check. So the amendment, the proposal is to add 2 more signers.
And you're saying for now?
Well, that would probably be going forward, but we're going from 7 under the prior board to 4 now.
Okay.
And we're also going to be, and this is something the Finance Committee will take up and discuss, we're likely going to increase the minimum checks that require signers, because right now it's only $100.
Okay.
Did you?
Julian?
I understood we were
Paula.
thinking of Paula for this role, because Paula was a previous signer. That we were adding Paula and Melanie, because they're the ones that habitually sign in the past. Not to exclude Mr. Measy, but to include Paula as well.
Just to clarify, 7 people are able to, or were able under the previous regime to sign. Not all 7 were regular signers. There were a few of us who did it on a pretty steady basis. But some people were just more available than others.
So, Roy, what is the motion that you are proposing?
We can discuss it if you have an opinion, or? Okay, so then the motion would be, I don't know if I'm technically amending it, or it's the motion to add Paula and Melanie as authorized signers.
Okay, and who was that?
Second the motion.
All right, Martha, thank you very much. Is there further discussion on the motion, which is to add Melanie and Paula as additional signers? Seeing none, let me call for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Roy.
Okay, 2 more things. One is the funds for the sale of the development rights on the Red House. That money has been paid and is now in escrow. So the developers paid it. It's sitting in escrow. And when the rights are formally transferred to the developer, which is several months away, then we will get paid at that point. So I just wanted to update that status. And it's $1 million. Yes. And the last thing I wanted to mention is our fiscal year ends in 2 weeks. We are a July 1st fiscal year. You can see the budget for next year. You can link directly from the homepage of the website. Just keep in mind that budget was finalized in March, and it's hard to predict expenses going out 15 months, especially since we have some new line items like the park and the Red House. But it's there, and if anyone has any questions or comments, you can email the council or email directly, and we can talk about it. And next month, I'll talk more about when the year closes out, how we did versus the budget, and maybe talk a little bit more about next year's budget. That was it.
Thanks.
Just a few brief items. We have started the development process with ActiveNet. This is the system that was approved by the previous council a couple of months ago to allow for village residents to sign up and pay online for classes, programs, events, and activities at the center. So we've begun that implementation process with ActiveNet, and the staff has been meeting. We started a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to have a series of sort of design meetings, implementation meetings. They're going to get a lot of data from us as they build this platform and find out what we're doing and what we want everybody to be able to sign up for. It's about a 6 to 8 week estimated timeline, so we're looking at probably late July to have this up and running, which will time pretty well for the fall season of classes, which typically start over again in September after taking a little break in the summer, so we should have it up and running by then. I'm going to turn it over to Jason for a couple of quick points on the website.
Thanks, Julian. Adding to what Julian has mentioned, we're further expanding our innovation and technology applications. So at the moment, we're developing a street light outage map that will be on the website that residents can select a particular street light and inform us if that particular light is out or damaged. We'll get an immediate message and we'll handle that request appropriately. That should be out within, I would say, the next 30 days. We're working with our web developer, and that's the latest we're working on.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is an update on Page Park project from Jed Narsavage at Green Sweep. Thanks for being here tonight, Jed.
So I appreciate the time to be here. Some of you are new faces to me from the last few times I was here. So Roy, Bobby, Martha, Cheryl, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. Looking forward to working with you in the continuation of the project. First off, I just wanted to provide a bit of an update and I guess a response to a couple of the questions that had come up during the public comment phase. I appreciate the input, both kind of pro and con. I will say that anyone who is telling you that this was not an open and public process throughout the design process is simply being disingenuous. I myself sat through 2 long, full, robust council meetings as part of the process. The plans were posted online. There was a long public comment period when comments were received. And then the final design was revised multiple times as a result of those public comments. There was Parks Committee meetings that were also public that I also attended with Paula, Bruce, and Al. And many of the actual design changes seen in the park today are a direct result of those public comments. That included an increase in the size and the robustness of that buffer on the western edge of the park. So to the comment that it appears as if it's overplanted, that is by design. It is because of the requests of the adjacent residents to increase that buffer, to increase the green wall along that side of the park. So yes, it is overplanted. It is overplanted by design. The intention is that more mature plants are there early on and they grow together and provide a buffer on that side. Another change was the location and the size of the play area. It was relocated away from the Willard. It was shrunk in size. Another change as a result of public comment was the location and size of the plaza. That was moved. Hardscape was reduced by 40% from the original design. The location and shape of the southwest staircase was changed as a result of public comment. It was relocated to preserve more existing trees, including one that Ms. Durbin specifically requested that we keep, and we have, and to avoid some utility conflicts that would have proved quite costly. Other public comments led to the addition of 2 large caliper trees, including the black gum, the signature tree, and a little leaf linden. Public comment led to the removal, addition, or revision of selections on the plant list, and public comment led to the elimination of the barbecue grills that we had originally planned on putting in the patio in the back. All of that was a result of public comment. All of that was a result of meetings and input and comments coming from the public. So this was a very long, a very public, and a very open process. It was very robust, and I think it's resulted in a park that has a little bit of all of us in it that have contributed to this. I think everybody who contributed and everybody who participated in this process can probably point to something in the park and say, I helped to make that possible. And personally, I feel quite proud about that. To answer a couple of the questions about some of the things that are happening, there are going to be tables and chairs tomorrow. We just actually received them at our shop. We've got them. We're going to be getting them assembled and spread out over the course of the next couple of days. We are also going to be putting wood chips down in the play area to just kind of keep that neat and clean while a decision is still pending on the play area equipment. I will note on that that has been hanging out there for a while. Our team made recommendations in February on which play area equipment would fit there, which play area equipment would work there safely, and we're still awaiting a decision from the council on that. Hence the reason why it remains the way that it is. So we are going to fill that with wood chips, get that just looking nice and neat at this point, and we are getting tables and chairs spread out. Those are the site furnishings. And then I'll just make a comment on the dogs. I have noticed that they are kind of ripping through the planted areas. I know that there's maybe very little that can be done about that. The intent of the park was to maintain some open space, maintain a lawn area so that people could sit on it and enjoy it and also walk their dogs. So I'm hoping as a dog person that that's preserved, but I also understand that there's probably a need to at least put up maybe some signs to keep them from ripping up the plants themselves, especially while they're still maturing. That might be beneficial. As far as the permitting, is this still on? Okay. As far as the permitting process, that right now is our biggest frustration and our biggest hangup. As some of you are aware, when this process started, our design team, asked the council, asked the village management multiple times what permits are needed, what is needed, what do we need to do, what do we need to do. We were told emphatically multiple times by multiple people, you don't need permits because you're operating under our authority, the village authority. We've done Humphrey Park without permits. You guys are good to go. You're off and running. So we started our work. Now we're trying to get a permit because we've learned that actually that wasn't true. So we are working with the county on that. We have sent them all of the plans, all of the documentation, all of the information. The main hangup is the pergola structure itself. As far as the county is concerned, that pergola structure, because it sits on public land, is considered a miscellaneous commercial structure. So it is a commercial structure, meaning I have to jump through the same hoops for that I would have to jump through almost if I was building a McDonald's on the site or building another high-rise, when all it is a pergola. Open top, open sides, no doors, no utilities, nothing. All of the information is with our county permit point of contact right now. However, it was brought to my attention after our initial meetings with him, brought to my attention by him. We had initial meetings with him in March and in April. I submitted all of the documentation to him in April, along with questions regarding some things regarding construction type, use group, sediment control numbers. I requested some clarification on those. When he got back to me with that clarification, he informed me that that information would be in the sealed and signed plans. He had never told me that these plans needed to be sealed and signed by a professional engineer. Multiple times when I met with him, he simply said, "Do you have plans?" I said, "Yes, we have plans. We have designs." I showed him the designs. We are now working to get those plans signed and sealed by a professional engineer. We were put in touch with one by Julian, a structural engineer, civil engineer who works with the, I think with a company who works with the village. He's been extremely helpful, but because he wasn't involved in the process, he, understandably so, is requiring a lot of information so that he can confidently dot his I's, cross his T's, and put his own seal and signature on the design. He is in touch with the iron fabricators, with the concrete specialists. They have been providing him information on the concrete PSI, the concrete thickness, the load capabilities of the steel, how the steel was manufactured, the steel thickness, the footing depth, everything. All of that information is being provided to him. My most recent conversation with him, in fact, with the engineer, was just today. I wanted to make sure that he was getting all of the information that he needed. He said that overall, yes, he was, but he hadn't yet begun his calculations yet. We've been in touch with him over the course of the past few weeks. We were first introduced to him on May 17th. I've provided him additional photos of the pergola footers when they were being poured. We almost fortuitously, we had the foresight to take pictures in progress when those footers were being poured, when the pergola was being constructed, to show the depth of the footers, the thickness of the concrete, the rebar that's in there, everything. So I've been providing all of that information to him as well. However, until I have those signed and sealed plans, and those signed and sealed plans are in the hands of Chris Allen, our point of contact with permitting, they will not conduct any kind of review of any of the additional documentation that I have sent them. I've asked them for an initial, some feedback, some review on that, because I've provided plans on the railings, I've provided plans on the pergola, I've provided site photos, I've provided a survey of the previous conditions at the park. I've provided a survey of the existing conditions now at the park, an as-built survey, a wall check survey that was done by the village engineer. I've provided a narrative explaining the thought process behind the siting of the pergola and how everything went. I've provided measurements that we've taken in the field of the slopes on all of the pathways. All of them are below the 8.6% that is required for ADA. There are some areas that will require a railing. We knew that. We are waiting to install that until we have the permit. They've told us to wait to install railings until we have the permit. So I understand that this has been a frustration. It has been a massive frustration for our team as well. We are doing our best to work our way through that. We have provided everything that has been asked of us by the county. And I will say that it is a hang-up, a delay, a problem right now, but it is not preventing us from using the park, from enjoying the park, from enjoying the space. People are using it. People are working there, walking through there, enjoying it, sitting down on the sitting walls. They're going to be using the furniture. I love to see that. There's nothing that is preventing us from using the park. And if we had gone through this long, tiresome permit process at the beginning, we would have these same frustrations at the beginning of the process, but we would have started much later, and we would not have a park right now. We would likely have an empty field of dirt or something that was in the same kind of construction progress that it was in over the course of the winter. when the pathways were closed off and nobody could walk through and there were skid steers driving around through there. That's likely what it would look like now. So while it is upsetting that, you know, these things were missed by all parties involved at the beginning, in the end, we are working our way through it, and yet we still have a beautiful park to enjoy right now. Those are kind of the main updates that I have right now on the permitting, the other things that are happening in the park right now. We're still awaiting the removal of the Porta-John. My neighbor back here had mentioned that. It's bothering us as well. We've asked the company that we rented it from for 3 weeks to come and take it away. I think they've forgotten about it. I'm real close to just telling one of my crews to come in with a Bobcat and load that thing up and get it out of there. Because we're done using it. And plus that spot, we still have one more tree that's going in, a flowering dogwood that's going in right in that spot, and some perennials. So I need that Porta-John gone. So I'm trying to get that out of here. And like I said, I may just before the end of this week, just have some of our guys come down and just take it out of here. The irrigation system was installed. It is fully operational. It is working. It also has a rain sensor. That rain sensor is up on the top of the pergola. It's at one of the ends. You probably wouldn't even know what it was. It's very, very small, kind of collects rain, and it speaks to the transmitter, to the control box of the irrigation system via Wi-Fi. And so when it rains, it tells the system, hey, you don't need to kick on this evening. So that saves in water, saves in waste, saves in stormwater runoff. So that's something that we've added to the system, and that will, I think that's a beneficial thing. So because the irrigation's on, the plants are getting water now. We're going to definitely keep our eye on things. There was a question about what happens if plants start to not do well. As we are not only the designers and the builders of the park, we're also maintaining it. You have somebody in-house right now who is already really paying attention to that. Our crews that come by keep an eye on that, and anything that needs to be replaced, we will address, and we will make replacements as needed for plants that fail as a result of disease or weakness of the plant or something like that. So they shouldn't fail now as a result of lack of water because we've got an irrigation system in. So we will definitely be keeping our eye on the plants. You guys were asking about some of those. We will definitely be staying on top of those. I can't think of any other updates or kind of responses that I had right now. So I'll kind of pause. I've been talking for a while and my throat's getting dry.
Thanks very much, Mr. Narsavage. Let me see if there are questions from the council. Michael?
Just a quick one, Jed. Tell me about the handrails. In order to install the handrails on the ramps, you need the permit. What about the handrails on the steps in the south, in the steps going up? Do you need a permit for that also?
Same situation. Yeah. The handrails are on pause. The other thing that's on pause that was already approved
I'm sorry,
by
the handrails are structural, in other words?
Yeah, they're steel.
And that's why you need the permit to do that?
Yes, the permit, the stop work order applied to the pergola, which was already done, and anything access related. So because the pathways and everything are already done, that's really the handrail. So we have those designs for the handrails. We also have a design, and it was the cost of which was already approved for the ramp into the play area from the back, which was discussed at a previous council meeting. We have to hold off on installing that as well because of the stop work order.
Okay.
So there are a few things that are being held up as a result of the permit.
Okay, thank you.
Paula and then Cheryl.
I just wanted to know why a new irrigation system was put in, because I believe I can remember when we discovered that there was already a system.
So yes, there was a system in place, but if you recall the layout of the park before, it's a lot different than the layout of the park now. So that irrigation system had pipes and heads that would have popped up where we have hardscape now, and vice versa. It would have had pipes and heads not covering areas that we need to cover now. So that system needed to be taken out and redone with a new system with new zones and new lines that actually covered the planted areas as they exist now. Not to
Cheryl?
mention the fact that the controller on that old system, speaking as the company that was maintaining it, had started to become incredibly unreliable. So replacing it with a new, much more reliable controller was also needed.
Thank you. One quick question on the furniture that's coming in. How is it being held down?
So the benches that we have in the park right now, those are anchored in place. The furniture that we're going to put in, the design intent is for Page Park to resemble, in a sense, Bryant Park in New York City with tables and chairs that, as I think a couple people have mentioned, can be moved, can be put into groupings of 2 and 3, can have, you can have a table here, a table there. You could pull a couple things together. You could bring a group together. There was talk early on of anchoring things down. However, the tables that can be anchored down, a lot of them are extremely industrial looking. They are large, they are unwieldy, they are not in keeping with the character of Page Park that I think all of us are trying to achieve, which is a classic, enjoyable open space and green space. So at the urging of folks like Bruce and Al and others from the previous council and Julian, we shifted gears a little bit and we've gone with things that are heavy and sturdy. They are not flimsy for sure, but they can be moved about so that the park can be used in any way that its users and visitors would like to use it. That way also, if the large plaza area is put to use for a concert or say a craft show or a flower show or something like that, things can be moved off to the side and a variety of uses can be accommodated.
Melanie? And then Martha, and then Roy?
Jed, the table arrangements, do they allow spaces for folks with mobility issues who might be in a wheelchair or a scooter cart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The intent is certainly not to overcrowd the space at all. We have 10 sets of each one is a table and 2 chairs, where we plan to spread them out so that, it has a nice kind of spread out look. There's plenty of area for circulation, both for folks with mobility issues and folks without. And because of the movability of the chairs and the tables, and because the tables would be set up in a way that, even if you had one table, say, that had 4 chairs around it, and you couldn't roll your wheelchair up to that one, because those chairs have been moved over here, that means there's some free table somewhere that you can roll up to that one over there. That's one of the other reasons why we went with things that were movable, was for the versatility of the space. Early on in the process, there was a lot of talk about wind and wind problems moving through there. Over the course of our construction work on the site, our discussions with members of the council, we found that to be a bit overblown, if you'll forgive my choice of words. So we are going to go with the movable tables and chairs. I will say that if it turns out that they are tumbling down the hill into North Park Avenue, we'll make a move, but we're going to try to stick with what we had originally planned to do. We believe that it will work well. If it doesn't, we'll change. We're not that stubborn.
Martha and Roy, and then Paula.
First, I'd like to say I appreciate you coming here. Many, many people have had questions, and you can answer in a level of detail that I don't think many of us can. So thank you for coming here. I have,
No problem.
2 questions. Do you have an idea of when the engineer that you've hired will have the signed and sealed documents for submission to the county?
I unfortunately do not. I
Okay.
asked him that very question today, and he was not able to give me an answer on a definite date. Because I asked him today specifically, I said, I'm going in front of the village council tonight. I can guarantee you that I will be asked about a timeline. And here you are fulfilling that prophecy, Martha.
Right.
He responded that he is still compiling all of the information that's been sent to him. He's making his own calculations. He seems to be being extremely thorough. And honestly, from a professional standpoint, I appreciate that. Because he was not part of this process early on, he needs to be absolutely certain that he can trust putting his sign and signature, or his sign and seal on this. I feel confident in it. Everybody that was involved in building it feels confident in it. That structure is not going anywhere. It's in like 30-inch footers. It's probably going to survive a nuclear apocalypse. But Mr. Don Feng, who is our engineer, I respect the fact that he's like, I'm not just going to take your word for it. I'm going to do my own calculations. I'm going to do my own engineering work on it. So that's the way that things are going. I will continue to press him without pressuring him, and I will provide updates as I can.
Thank you.
Sure.
The second question relates to cost. At the beginning of this project, it wasn't anticipated that permits would be needed, and it wasn't anticipated that you would need to hire an engineer. And I understand maybe there were some handrails that weren't anticipated. To what extent are you planning on charging extra for those things to the village council?
So I will say that there already was only one change order so far, which for a project of this scope and complexity is pretty good to only have one change order so far. And that was for the addition of the ramp into the play area towards the rear of the park to come down towards the perimeter path. We have an estimate in hand for the additional handrails. Handrails were part of the original design and cost estimate. I want to clarify that, but they were only on one side of the ramp and on one side of the stairs. We've now been told we need them on two sides. We need them on both sides of basically the northeast or the southeast and the southwest entrance. So I have an estimate in hand from our fabricator for putting that second line in. However, I'm waiting to make sure that his design is actually approved by the county before I tell you that is what the additional railing will cost. Because I certainly do not want to come to the council and say the additional railings will cost X, and we all approve, or you approve design X, and then the county says, no, you have to do it different, and then things change. I'd like to come to you just one time and explain the cost of the second railings on each side, and that's that. So that's really kind of the only possible outstanding additional expense that is still out there.
Okay, so it's the ramp to the play area, an additional handrail on the other side.
It's really just the additional handrail. The ramp was already estimated, costed, and approved by the previous council.
Okay, I understand, but that was a change order, so that was different than the original
That
charge.
was a separate change order, yes.
And now, the only additional part is the other side of a handrail in those two locations.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Just for clarification, if I may, before I turn it over to Roy, unless the county comes back and requires other changes, then that could represent additional costs as well. We just don't know what those could look like. You're not anticipating that they will be there, but it's possible that they could be. Is that right?
It is always possible when you're dealing with the county bureaucracy. I do not anticipate changes, especially since honestly, their permit focus is so narrow on really just the pergola and access. That's a very narrow part of the entire scope of the project. So while that lessens the risk of them coming back with requests. It doesn't eliminate it.
Okay, thanks. Roy, and then Paul?
Yeah. Okay, so I just, to follow up on what Martha said, do you know, we talking about days or weeks or months for that engineer's report?
I'm hoping, honestly, since as of the end of this week, I believe he will have truly everything that he needs, because I'm sending him more pictures and I'm sending him more information. And in fact, just before this meeting, he sent me an email asking for some clarification on a couple things, which I plan to respond to first thing tomorrow morning. Again, I can't speak for him, but my hope is that by the end of this week, he's able to actually really start digging into things. And then I would hope within a couple of weeks, he can have everything together, and then we can truly officially start that review process with the county once he actually signs and seals things.
Okay.
But like I said, I am trying to press him without pressuring him.
Okay, and besides that, is there anything that remains to be filed?
With the county?
Yes.
No, just
Okay.
I need the permit.
Okay, have we gotten any response from the county, like based on what was filed, any preliminary feedback or response?
Other than my initial on-site meeting with Chris, which was in March 20th, when he talked to me about what needed to be done, and he helped me understand how I could navigate the process, because there are certain ways that with the cost of the project, you can apply the cost of certain access components to the permit application to make the case that you are making the area as accessible as possible within the topography and within the budget. The only feedback I've gotten from him was a request for a wall check, which we provided, and then now the request for the signed and sealed plans. Other than that, I haven't gotten back any actual feedback, so to speak, on this looks good, this doesn't look good, I would recommend tweaking this or tweaking that. All I've gotten is those two requests, the request for the wall check, which was provided, the request for the signed and sealed plans, which we've been talking about here tonight.
So what would be the worst case? Like, what could the county come back with and say, is there any possibility that they could want something redesigned or rebuilt, or?
I really don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know. I am hopeful that because all of the surfaces in the park are, within the required slope, that the park provides far greater accessibility now than it did before. And I've gone over all of this with Chris Allen. So he is understanding of that and recognizes it as well, that nothing will need to be rebuilt. The pergola, like I said, is a solid piece of architecture. There is going to be no need to rebuild that. Like I said, I don't want to make any promises other than, and I understand that hope is not a strategy, but based on my experience with this project, my experience working with Chris Allen so far at the county, is that his goal is really the same as ours. He wants to see this through to completion. He wants this to just be off his desk as well, and let's get this finalized, and let's make sure that we can stamp everything, and this part can be truly, truly done. So that gives me hope that he is not going to throw many wrenches into the plan. But again, I just don't know. I just don't know.
Okay, and so do you have any idea, once the engineer's report is filed, what the timeline would be?
Once I get that engineer's report, I plan to move extremely fast.
No, I mean, how long would the county take to get
The
back?
county's review takes 30 to 45 days. Now, again, I've given them all of the information. I gave them the information back in April, on April 28th, but they haven't looked at anything because they've told me I still need signed and sealed plans. So essentially, it's a situation that until the package is wholly complete, they don't look at any parts of it.
Right. Okay, and I thought there were other parts of Montgomery County that also review besides Chris.
Oh, it is. It goes
Yeah,
through a
okay.
whole.
Okay, so it's not just his sign off.
No, he's my main point of contact. But it does go through kind of a series of reviews. But he did tell me, I will say, when I first met with him in March, he did tell me that he had chatted with that group of reviewers about the project, and all of them, he said, had said to him, I don't see any glaring issues. But again, that was very early before they had a lot of information. But they said, I don't see a lot of glaring issues. So that, to me, spoke to, okay, at least we're getting off on the right foot. Now, again, that was before all of this information has been provided to them. But I am confident that all that information has done is further reinforced our case that we have gone about this in building this park the right way.
All right. Thanks.
Paula?
Based on what we've heard, I'd just like to remind the council that there is something we voted to install in the park, which was a plaque to Cleo Tavani. And I'm just wondering if this can't go forward now. Is this not working? Oh, thank you. I'm suggesting that based on what we've heard, that furnishings are being bought and installed in the park, or will be soon. I'm suggesting that we consider the council's vote, which was unanimous, to install a plaque to Cleo Tavani. And could that go forward now, since the park is almost ready? I see no reason it couldn't be installed now.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Martha?
One question about dogs. You said you had observed recently that there were dogs, I think you used the term ripping through the shrubbery?
Yeah, they're just
Okay.
kind of, they're going off into
So my question is, are these dogs that you're observing on leash or off leash?
on leash.
They're on leash and they're still, okay.
They're just kind of getting up into the, as a dog owner myself, I try to make sure my dog doesn't get too far away.
I just wanted
on
to
either
know.
side, and they're just kind of going way up in there and starting to
Okay,
dig
that's
things up.
helpful. Thank you.
Just one quick one. Jed, as I remember the design, there was supposed to be some foliage on the pergola, some whatever. Does the stop work order mean you can't install that?
It
Or
doesn't
just
necessarily
stormwater?
mean that, but I am holding off on doing that just in case. The plan is to plant, I believe that at a Parks Committee meeting, we had agreed upon wisteria.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't even ordered it yet because I'm not counting my chickens, so to speak. But yes, that is the plan, is that there will be wisteria that is planted along that front sitting wall, and that using wires so that you can use like training wires, like plant training wires, if you're familiar with like climbing roses, to make sure that that wisteria gets up to the pergola itself, and then eventually it'll grow up and over, and the blooms will hang down. Obviously, that'll take some time, but that's the design intent.
That would really make the thing look a lot better.
Agreed.
Are there any other questions from council members? I just have one, Ned, and also thank you very much for being here tonight and for answering the questions as directly as you have. You can see that there are a lot of questions, and I think you've provided straightforward answers to many of them tonight. In the middle of what's to be the children's play area, there are two above-ground pipes that appear to have some kind of elastic over them. What is that?
So there's actually 3 of them.
Okay.
Those are an underground drainage system that we installed in that place because that area is a low spot in the park. And because of the design of the area, because of the sitting walls on the side, the water doesn't really have much of a place to go in that area. So what we installed were 3 what's called a flow well. It's essentially like if you have a bathtub with no drain, you're putting a drain in it. So it is a 50-gallon, each one of them is a 50-gallon plastic underground catchment basin with holes in it, surrounded by gravel and other aggregate, and there is a small grate at the top that grate is covered with fabric to prevent sediment from getting down in there, so that then only water actually gets through there.
Okay.
The intent is that once the wood chips go in, the wood chips will cover that just ever so slightly, so you don't see those, but they're still there for water to percolate down through the wood chips into the catchment basin and then out down underground. The pits, each one of them is about 3.5 feet deep.
Okay.
And I will say also about the water in that place, because I've had a couple questions actually from people in the park when I've been there. I recognize that it's a low spot. It does get standing water after large-scale rain events. However, our system is working. Kind of standard industry practice is as long as that standing water goes away after about 48 hours, the system's working. And I have observed after large rain events, which admittedly there have not been a lot of them lately, but the ones that we have had, that place is saturated and muddy immediately after a rain, as what would be expected. By the second day, it's a heck of a lot less. It looks much better. By the third day, the water is gone and it's just a little squishy. So our system is working.
Great. So there won't be a trip hazard or
No,
or a fall hazard catching an
No.
edge on a knee or something like that?
No,
Great.
again, because the kind of unfinished nature of that area,
Yep.
that's kind of the situation as it is right now. But getting the wood chips down will help rectify that.
Great. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Once again, any other questions from council members? Seeing none, thanks very much, Mr. Narsavage. Appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you.
Yeah.
And like I said, for those of you who I've been working with, like Mike, Melanie, Paula, look forward to continuing to work with you guys as we bring this to a conclusion. And Roy, Bobby, Martha, Cheryl, looking forward to working with you guys as well. I'm excited
you.
about it. Thank you, guys.
That'll take us into new business. I want to make some comments to provide some background on this. Page Park has been a property generating considerable controversy and argument for nearly a decade. Some argue that council members have been elected or replaced as a result of their decisions relative to Page Park. The present park, now a fact on the ground, still generates controversy in a number of areas. You've heard of some of them tonight: the process by which decisions were made to create the current design, the approvals and permits necessary to orient and begin construction, the cost associated with the present design, the aesthetics of the present design, the rules for the park's use after its official opening, and whether the prior council's theory of use for the park will prove true. This item that the council will consider now proposes a meeting in July asking for residents to reflect publicly on these or other park-related issues as they see them, so that the current council members may consider them and, if prudent, address some or none of them in the fall. The meeting would be widely posted and publicized, open to the public, as a listening session for council members. In other words, we would listen only. Council bylaws recognize 4 types of council meetings: regular meetings, special meetings, work sessions, and public hearings. The agenda notes the possibility of a special meeting, but the language of the bylaws may suggest that a work session for the purpose of discussing, planning, researching, and reviewing village business may be the better choice, with agenda items limited, which this meeting would be. So I'll recognize a motion and support for one or another type of meeting on Page Park in July, with details to be forthcoming. And if there is a motion and support, let's have some discussion about that motion and any amendments as needed. Is there a motion and support? Martha?
Oh, I'd like to make a comment first.
Sure.
I think we've made it clear that input from our community is extremely important, and it's hard to move forward on difficult topics without really understanding and everybody having an opportunity to speak. And given the options we have for the types of meetings, it does seem like a work session is best, because we can listen and then talk among ourselves without necessarily having to make a decision on something. So for that reason, I'd like to make a motion to have work session on this topic.
Is there support for that? Cheryl, thank you very much. One other comment before we enter into discussion. One might see this meeting as part of a quality improvement process for our government. Quality improvement activities are rampant in the public and nonprofit sector as a way of reviewing what's been done and, if need be, establish other procedures and processes going forward. So there's been a motion and support. Before we have a vote on this, is there any discussion? Paula?
I'd just like to refer to all the information that we learned today. So if we're not allowed to say anything, how will this be communicated to the people who are attending, all of them? And you see that not many people come to these meetings, so they wouldn't have heard it here. Presumably, we get more people than, if that's the case,
Right.
than attend our meetings.
Right. Of course, I'd hope that through the communication efforts that we would make more people first would know about the meeting, and secondly, that we will, as a part of future discussion, after we have the meeting, if so, the council so desires, we talk specifically about how we will communicate what we've heard and whether there are decisions that we'd like to recommend.
And we're going to do that by the time of the meeting in July?
No, we will have a meeting to accept input, and then we will have a month, 2 months, whatever time period the council agrees to digest what we've heard. And if there are recommendations that the council wishes to make, we will have a public meeting to discuss those and to
I think
do
I
that.
wasn't clear. I'm worried about the folks attending the meeting, how informed they will be if they haven't been coming to our meetings.
Well, one
And
of the
how would we inform them if we can't talk about what we know?
So there are a number of ways I think that can be done, but perhaps that's something we can discuss as we prepare for the meeting. What we've heard tonight and we've heard in previous meetings is that there's a well-documented record of the decisions that were made. And in fact, there's a video of the presentation tonight. All of these could be publicized as ways for people who are attending the meeting to know more about the history of the park, the decisions that were made, and to inform them. But I'd be happy, and I'm sure other council members would be happy to have your suggestions, or either here or at another time, about how we might do that.
Okay.
Thanks. Michael?
Not sure how to respond to the proposal. Obviously there should be, we should always be in a position of accepting input. But this is probably the third meeting, maybe at least, where we've heard several people talk about how terrible the park is and several people talk about how wonderful the park is. And my supposition is that we have a meeting like this and we're going to have several people telling us how terrible the park is and several people telling us how wonderful it is. We'll also have several people telling us that the way we came to design the park was an exercise in authoritarianism, and then we'll have other people telling us that it was a study in democracy. What's the point at this point? Now, I can well see the need to have a discussion of how we govern the park as it, in terms of the various procedures that we might use, some suggestions that people might make about minor modifications as thing goes on. But frankly, I think it's a waste of time. Now, if we decide to go forward, the one thing I would insist upon, contrary to what your suggestion is, Bobby, is that after people say whatever they want to say, that each member of the council have an opportunity to make a statement. Because I'm not going to sit here while people tell me things which aren't true about the park and how we did things and how it proceeded. I think we should all have an opportunity at the end to say what we want to say in response. I'm not saying that we should engage each speaker individually. That would take forever. But we should all have an opportunity to say, and if you don't want to say anything, then don't say anything. So my vote at this point is to not have the meeting, but if we're going to have the meeting, we have to have a meeting where we as council members can say what we want to say at the end.
Thanks, Michael. Martha?
About council members speaking, my reading on what a work session is that is permitted. It is, you don't necessarily have to have it only a listening session to the public, but what else would we learn? We've heard this, we've heard that. I presume we'll learn this and that. I don't presume anything. I think we have to ask and we have to listen regardless of what we've already heard or what we think we might hear. I think we need to give people an opportunity because it sounds like people feel they haven't had enough opportunity.
Cheryl?
My only comment is we need to start it early and not at 7:30 and put a time frame on it. It's to start the meeting, whatever it becomes is a workshop, a special meeting, whatever it is that we start it much earlier than 7:30 and we put a time frame on it.
Thanks. Are there other comments? Melanie?
My only concern is that I think how we advertise this meeting, because if you say we want to have a meeting, a listening session, to have residents come and express their views, I'm envisioning a room full of people complaining about the park or expressing things that are wrong with it, or not standing up and saying, I love the park, like we heard tonight. I'm thinking, why would they bother coming to say that? If it's a listening session, if it's marketed as a way to, hear one more round of complaints about Page Park. And my concern is that we would get a very skewed view of how residents really feel about the park. I don't think you're going to get tons of people coming out saying, yeah, looks good, I can't wait to use it. I think you'll get people coming saying, we weren't given a chance to participate. It's overplanted, it's this, it's that. And it gives the council, I think, a not realistic representation of what people really think about the park. And that is my concern with a listening session, is that you're going to hear one side, basically. And then what? Is the expectation that we're going to put into action these complaints and to try to resolve everyone's problems with the park? I don't think that's a good way to proceed.
Thanks. Paula?
Maybe it would be better to have this kind of meeting in a year after the park's been going.
Are there other comments or suggestions? No.
I would say, behind Paula's statement, that could be another opportunity. I mean, considering for those of us who have worked around government and understanding how long it takes to get permits, and I commend Jeb for standing there and trying to answer that question. You have no idea. And I think it may be more valuable if what it is that we're looking for, to still have something where people can speak, but speak when the park is finished. Because as we've heard, and I've sat here many a months listening to Page Park disputes, it's not finished and it's being judged critically. That's my personal viewpoint. And I think it's unfair, because if you could not tell in his speech, he is very frustrated as a business owner, a business person, I should say. And I understand that. And I understand the frustration of working with the permits office in government bureaucracy. I understand also that we want to give people the opportunity to speak and share what their comments are, but I also understand it can't just be a complaint session. So if it's done, because I can think, I'm sure, I don't speak for everybody here, but I'm sure everybody is tired of listening to what has not been done correctly with Page Park. And I too agree that it was nice to hear positive comments, because I'll be honest, for the last year that I've been living here, I've been here a long time in this area, but living here as a resident, every meeting has been negative on Page Park. You might get a bing that somebody said something nice. So I understand the comments that have been said tonight. I also understand that it is important to hear what people have to say, but which is why I kind of said the time frame, it needs to be early and we need to frame it. And I think if we are going to talk about it after it's finished. I would agree with that. I think you'll get more of a realistic, and maybe you won't, I don't know, but at least it's finished, and to stop nitpicking at it along the way.
Michael?
Building on what Cheryl and Paula have said, I'm not sure how you want to proceed here, but perhaps to amend the motion to have this meeting, shall we say 6 months from now, when the park is done and ready, and then have people comment on what the product is, rather than having it now where we're likely to have simply a repeat of what's gone on. I don't know, can I make an amendment to the motion? Yeah, I could propose an amendment that we have the meeting, what would that be, sometime in January?
Is there?
I wouldn't have it in the winter.
Okay.
I think we should go through a year of the park.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there support for the motion?
I'm flexible on when it might be. I just don't think now is the best time. Let me rescind. Yeah, but how do I? I'm open. Should it be a year or a year
You
from
can
now?
propose whatever, like,
All
but
right,
you
let me
have to.
take back the
Right.
motion, rescind it. Thank you, Cheryl, and propose that we have such a meeting, and we have such a meeting. Let us say next May. How about that? Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, so is there support for that motion? Melanie, you support it? Is there discussion about that motion?
I would go even further to add to that. Next May, pending permits and everything has been completed. Because you can have it next May, and as we listen, they can come back and say, we don't like the pergola. So now the pergola's got to come down, and now we're in April. So I would say yes to Michael's motion and add to that pending permits completed and signed.
Martha?
I think these two ideas, meaning the meetings at different times, are really for two different purposes, and they're not interchangeable, they're not the same. I view the first idea of talking about this now and learning about this now as sort of almost a form of closure. Like, this is it, what if anything can be done? If nothing, what did we learn from it? And we move on. In a year, and whether I'm tired of hearing this or that is completely irrelevant. I'm not tired, it's my job up here to listen and hear. So, but getting sort of an evaluation of what people think in a year, I'm not opposed to that, but it's not a replacement for the original idea.
Roy?
So I guess my question, mostly for you, is if maybe you can narrow the scope of what it is you're looking for at this meeting. Is it intended to be people giving opinions? Is it intended to be suggestions for improvements, or to rehash what was done in the past? I mean, what would be your goal for this meeting?
My goal would be to see whether there are suggestions that people who may not have had an opportunity to make might be ones that we want to consider. It's clear to me that if we open this meeting, as would be the intent to residents, that we will hear both sides of the story again. Paula?
People who have suggestions about the park have the opportunity to express them at these meetings. And if they don't come to these meetings, why do we think they would come to a special meeting?
Thanks. Thanks for the comment, Paula. Are there any other comments from council? There is an amendment to the original motion. Michael, you want to restate the amendment?
That we have such a meeting, but that we have it in May, assuming, as Cheryl suggests, that the park is completed at that time, that we have the permits and so on. Okay. Okay. With the understanding that that we would have an opportunity after the comments for each council member to make a comment.
So that wasn't part of the original motion, but Martha, you made the original motion? Yeah. Okay. So you're adding that? Okay. And
Did everyone hear?
okay.
Should I repeat it, or
we heard
I
you.
forgot
Does
to?
everybody hear that? And who supported that motion, the original motion? No, you made it and Cheryl supported it. Is there any further discussion? Then on the original motion, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? So it's 3-3. The motion fails. I'm sorry? There were 3 in favor, there were 3 opposed.
You have a in favor, not in favor, and I didn't hear you say abstention.
Yes.
You have.
Do you have an abstention?
Yes.
So let the vote be recorded as 3 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention. The motion fails. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the renewal of the lease with tenants at 4602 North Park Avenue. Julian, do you want to present this to us?
Sure. I provided the lease to the council in the packet. This is to renew the lease with the tenants at 4602 North Park, the village-owned property, and we've had a group of artists, 10 artists in there since the summer of 2021. It was a one-year lease originally. It was extended last year for another year, and now they are interested in extending for another year, which would start on September 1st. Any notice required is, any action taken requires 2 months' notice if we're going to make a change. That's why this is coming before you now. The current lease amount is $3,000 per month, the rent. We've been very pleased with the tenants. They've been terrific to work with. They've paid their rent every month. They've done a nice job keeping the space together. We've had no issues with them as tenants or any complaints generated by people about them. They've done a very nice art show in the center. They plan to do another show this fall, so we're certainly hoping to continue with them, but they have requested a lease extension of 1 year.
Thank you, Julian.
I move that we extend the lease as recommended by the manager.
Is there support? Thank you, Paula. Is there discussion? First Roy and then Paula.
So I know this is a moot point because I spoke to Julian about it, but there is a paragraph, and the way it's written, it says we have to pay a fee of 4% to the broker, and my understanding is that we don't have to pay that. So I would just, to be clear, remove that paragraph. It's number 23. So I'm making a motion to amend the lease simply by removing paragraph 23, brokerage.
That motion? Yeah. Yes, Michael, thank you. Is there any discussion about that motion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Paula?
I want to single out Article 8 in the lease. The last sentence says, in such case, the full amount of the award shall belong to and be retained by the landlord, free of any claim or right therein of thee.
So
we're missing words.
So we're missing language.
Yeah, it's fine.
Do you,
Yes, I don't know what's supposed to be there, but I think this has to be corrected.
I think the of thee comes out.
Just delete of thee?
I think so.
Okay.
We can, free of any claim or right therein, period.
Okay.
I think that's the correct, but we can verify with the attorney.
Paula, do you want to make a motion to make that amendment to the lease?
Should I? Well, I think probably the motion should include the words as corrected, that we approve the
Okay,
lease
that's
as
fine.
corrected.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Is
so
there
I
support for that motion?
So I move that we amend the motion to include the words as corrected.
Okay. Is there support for that? Okay. Somebody want to claim support? Anybody? Martha, thanks very much. Okay. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Raise hand. Aye. Unanimous. All those opposed? Okay. Now we're back to the original motion on the lease with the two amendments. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your hand, please. Roy, you voting? Okay. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries 7-0. We've got next on the agenda, council committee assignments. Melanie?
Currently, the council committees include communications, finance, parks and grounds, and personnel. We also have an ad hoc committee currently called Public Safety. And before I go through the roster of who I'm recommending for members for each committee, I think we should formally take a vote to make the Public Safety Committee a standing permanent committee. And the purpose of that committee, I think, could be, well, we had one ad hoc committee meeting for the public safety group, and the purpose of that was to look at hiring off-duty police officers in the village and also the placement of security cameras. And I think that if we do make the Public Safety Committee a permanent committee, that we should broaden the scope of it to be more proactive, not just as a reaction to crime if it occurs in the community. And I think that we should emphasize encouraging residents to become familiar with the off-duty police officers, really engage them, and also to look at it as a more proactive group in ways that we can emphasize safety among our residents in the community and not just connect it with crime. And my, why don't we vote on making the Public Safety Committee permanent before I go through the roster?
So you're offering a motion to
I
make
am.
the
I'm making a
Public Safety
motion,
Committee
yes.
permanent?
Make the Public Safety Committee one of our standing council communities.
Is there support for that motion? Michael, thank you. Is there any discussion about that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? No, so approved unanimously. Thank you, Melanie.
And then one of the mayor's jobs is to appoint the committee members, and of course, the council needs to vote on this. For communications, Martha is the chairperson, also assisted by Paula and Melanie. Finance Committee, Roy would be the chairperson, assisted by Michael and Bobby. Parks and Grounds, Paula would be the chairperson, assisted by Michael and Roy. Public Safety, Cheryl would be the chairperson, assisted by Bobby and Melanie. And Personnel, which meets just once a year, Melanie is the chairperson, assisted by Michael and Martha.
Melanie, offering that as a motion? Well, let's find it. That's your motion?
That's what.
Okay, and Paula, thank you very much. Is there discussion?
Just thank Melanie for the careful way in which she goes about putting these things together and the broad consultation process that she uses in making these decisions.
Thanks, Michael. Any further discussion? Melanie?
Just one comment, that because the Public Safety Committee is so new, that I hope that Cheryl will add on to the start of the conversation for what the mission of that committee should be.
Okay.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to create, to establish these committees. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. All those opposed, same sign. None, and any abstentions? Obviously no, passes unanimously. Move on to the appointments of members to the Community Advisory Committee. Melanie?
Yes, unlike the council committee assignments, the mayor does not have in her list of responsibilities the sole job of appointing Community Advisory Committee members. However, I would like to recommend to the council that because they've done such an outstanding job, that the current members of the Community Advisory Committee be reappointed for 2 years. And in addition to that, based on the chairperson, Joe Boucher's recommendations, he ideally would like to add 3 or 4 new members. And rather than appoint or recommend anyone tonight, I would like to open up the application process to the whole village, since we haven't done that for a while, and review the applications in September. And at that time, I think we will also have the Program Advisory Committee members to review once Ann O'Neill submits those. And I am also, I think I can loop this in, I'm also recommending that Cheryl be the council liaison for the Community Advisory Committee. That would be my recommendation to the council.
So your motion is to appoint the current members for a 2-year term, to request approval for Cheryl to be the council liaison. That's the motion.
And
to open up
the application process to be reviewed in September, and encourage anyone who's interested to please attend the next Community Advisory Committee as a member of the public.
Right.
Can you just say who the current members are?
Pardon? Julian, do you have a list of them? We just gave them
It's in the book.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Community Service Awards.
It's in the packet, the CAC
I
list.
just wanted to get it on the record. Okay.
Are you, just a point of clarification, Melanie, with respect to those who are interested in participating or being considered for an appointment, are you suggesting that it's required that they attend the next
No,
meeting? Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
I know at times people have attended the meetings and said, no, it's interesting, but it's really not for me. But certainly anyone in the community who might even consider submitting an application should sit in on at least 1 or 2 meetings to make sure it's something that they're interested in.
Okay, and is there just any sort of application process that,
There's a very simple application that they can check with the staff for.
okay.
Yep.
Paula?
I think this motion has too many elements.
Okay, we can
And-
separate it. Okay.
Thank you.
So how about, first motion is that we reappoint the current Community Advisory Committee members to a 2-year term.
Okay, is there support for that motion? Paula? Is there discussion about that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand, yep. All those opposed, same sign. Paula? So that motion passes unanimously. Yeah.
You have the list in your packet?
She stated that we need to list the names of the people on the committee that they are put in the minutes.
Right. They can be listed in the minutes, no problem with that, yep. Okay. The second motion?
Second motion, I don't remember the order, but that Cheryl Tyler be the council liaison to the Community Advisory Committee.
Is there a second for that? Thank you, Paula.
Yeah,
Roy?
I think Cheryl has to accept the appointment. No, I think you have to accept the
Do
nomination.
you accept the nomination?
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, please. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries unanimously.
I don't think we need to even
Last
vote
one.
on this,
Right.
but any resident who has an interest in serving on the Community Advisory Committee be encouraged to check with staff and fill out the brief application. And that the council can take a look and move on any of those applications in September, along with the
No, I think it's just a
along
point
with
of
the program
information.
advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really more of a piece of information.
Paul.
I think that should probably be publicized.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it would probably go into the newsletter or onto the web. I'm not sure how you would publicize it.
Yeah, a couple places.
Great.
Also in that publicizing is that we make sure we state the days that the meeting, how often it occurs, so that people know, even though the people that are here are being reappointed, but for new people, to make sure they know when.
Okay, that was not a motion, that was a point of
That's just
information with
information,
additional suggestions. Okay, that takes us to the last item on the agenda, I believe, which is the bids on repair and painting the village center exterior walls. Julian?
Okay, this is basically the third segment of some work that we began last year. We did this in 2 phases initially, and it's essentially to completely cover the repainting of the entire center. The entire exterior of the center has needed to be repaired and repainted. This is the third segment, which is essentially half the building. If you stand by the front entrance to your left on that corner, and go all the way around the back and end up at the driveway on this side. That's the remaining segment that still needs to be done. So we did advertise for bids. We received 6 proposals, a pretty wide range of proposals, as we've come to expect, from $12,000 to $54,000. The company named Bradley, that unfortunately is the highest bid, they did the job for us last year in 2 segments, and they did very well, but they are the highest bid, and there were some bidders below them that looked very promising, including one that we're recommending named Blooms Contracting for a total cost of $36,825. They were sort of clustered in the middle. They had a tremendous reference from the state of Maryland. They did the courthouse building in Annapolis, exterior painting on that building, and got a tremendous reference from the state for that. So we are recommending Bloom's contracting for $36,825.
I have one question. So there's a mention of scaffolding. Okay, yeah. Is the scaffolding, the cost included in the bid?
Yes.
Okay. And the permits for that?
No permits needed
Okay,
for scaffolding.
sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much. Is there any further discussion on that motion to accept the recommendation from Julian? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. That concludes the agenda for the Village Council meeting of Monday, June 12th. Thank you to the members of the public who were here, and to those who remained, and thank you to council members for a productive meeting. We're adjourned.